My name is Renner. I'm a software engineer at Active Prospect, and recently I've had the opportunity to dive into the Elixir deployment toolchain. So as you're building your app, when you're getting ready to deploy to production for the first time, it's like, how do we deploy? There's options like, well, we could use Heroku, we could run Mix Phoenix Server in production, but what's in the Elixir ecosystem? What are these OTP releases? So Distillery is pretty much the de facto standard for compiling and packaging your application. And the cool thing about this is it packages in an Erlang VM, so you can ship your code out to a clean server and get it started. Pretty straightforward to set up, and there's a guide to how to tweak your Phoenix app to use it with Distillery. Once you generate the release using Mix Release, it creates a folder out in build, prod, rel, and then your app name. This folder structure here is what gets shipped out to the server. So anything that's using Distillery, this is what you'll see out on the server. One cool thing is out in bin, there's a script with the name of your app that's the control script for starting and stopping your app. So it can do things like starting your app as a daemon. You can connect in to a remote console for your running app. You can ping it. You can even do hot code upgrades. Pretty neat tool. So once you have this build put together, how do we ship it? One way you can do it is tar it up and SSH it out or SCP it out to a server. Another way you can do it is edeliver or, as we just saw, bootleg. So edeliver builds your application on a remote build server, and the reason this is important is so that the Erlang runtime you're bundling matches is compiled for the operating system that you're going to run in production. Once it builds it on the remote build server, it deploys it to staging, or you can use it to deploy to staging production. The config file is pretty simple. There's some you put in your staging host, production host, and it's also a bash script. So if you need to make changes, script some things in here, you can do that as well. So you start off running Mix edeliver to build your release, and that builds the release on the local build machine, and then copies it to your laptop so you have a compiled release locally. Then you can take that same release, deploy it to staging, and then go ahead and deploy it to production. It also has nice wrappers around those Distillery functions where you can start your app across all nodes, ping across all nodes. It's a cool tool. So once we start building the app, or if we build the app and deploy to multiple environments, the tricky part is what do we do with configuration that's different between these environments. For example, staging may have one set of API keys, prod may have another. So what happens when your app is compiled is it takes your config.exs files and compiles them down into a sysconfig file that goes out or that's part of your release. Now that sysconfig file, this is small, but it's an Erlang file that gets loaded to build your application environment when you call application.getEnv. So really, instead of checking this in and managing this per environment, you just really want to inject the changes that you want to make, like replacing host names. That's where conform comes in. It allows you to inject those changes. You define a nice app.conf file, and then conform takes that sysconfig, takes the changes from app.conf, and creates a new sysconfig that's used to actually start your application. And that has all of your new changes in. Last thing, 30 seconds. Last thing, if you're doing this, don't compile API keys into module variables because you won't be able to switch them out at runtime. And instead just call application.env. The tools are Distillery, edeliver, and conform. They work great. We use it in production. Thank you, and we're hiring.